everyone, and welcome to Learning Kitchen Live, episode number 19. My name is Valerie. I'm one of the dietitians here at Community Servings, and today we are talking about repurposing leftover foods. One of our favorite subjects here. I feel like we talk about this a lot throughout all of our episodes because it's really important to us that food not go to waste. But today is deliberately talking about what to do with leftovers, especially as we're approaching the holidays. And we are also going to talk a little bit about food safety, everybody's favorite subject, at least mine as a dietitian, because you never want to get sick or make anyone sick from the food you're cooking, especially with leftovers. So today we're going to make two recipes that are super versatile. The first one is leftover chicken tostada cups, and the second is going to be a leftover fried rice. So we're going to use leftover chicken and leftover rice, but again, these are super versatile and you could do so many different things with these. I like to call them like kitchen sink recipes, meaning you could probably put everything except the kitchen sink in these and make them taste good and not have food go to waste. So with that, we're going to get started with our chicken tostada cups. In some past episodes, my colleague Beth has specifically talked about using leftover food and food waste because there's so much of it in this country. So we just want to, we really like to focus on this and make sure people know how to safely use food that's sitting around in their house, even if it's you don't want to eat it the same way you ate it the first time. These are recipes designed to help you do something a little creative with it. So for the chicken tostada cups, the first thing we're going to do is actually make little tostada cups, which are easier than you might think. So I have just a regular muffin tin, and I'm going to spray it with just vegetable oil spray. If you didn't have this, you could just dip your fingers in a little oil and rub it around on the cups. And next, I have some corn tortillas, and these are I think 8-inch. I really wanted 6-inch. I couldn't find them. But I put a damp paper towel over them, and I'm gonna heat them in the microwave for about 20 seconds. They become a lot more pliable and they won't crack as easily if you do this. This is a great tip also if you're ever making something like enchiladas where you have to roll them. It just makes them less prone to cracking. If you're just joining us, this is Learning Kitchen Live, episode 19. My name is Valerie, and we're talking about repurposing leftovers today. And we'll do that for another few seconds, just to make sure they get nice and warmed up. So we thought this would be a great topic to cover prior to the holidays, because I think this year especially the holidays are going to look a little different for everybody, and you might not be having a large gathering that you might otherwise have, but you might want to cook traditional Thanksgiving foods or comfort foods around this time, and you may find yourself with some extra leftovers. So hopefully this is a good way to reuse at least some chicken or turkey that you might have. These are good, they're nice and warm. So what I'm gonna do, these are really shallow muffin tins, so I'm gonna do my best to get these in here. But all I'm literally doing is pressing these into the muffin tins. And I may not be able to do all of them because they may overlap a little. So when you have leftover like baked chicken or turkey, this is a great, or really any kind of chicken or poultry, this is a great thing to do because you take that chicken and all you have to do, if you don't want to eat it the way you did the night before, you just have to pull it off the bones, and we're going to shred it and mix it with some salsa to give it a little extra flavor. And that'll make it super easy and tasty. I actually, for this class, I actually bought a rotisserie chicken, mostly for time-saving reasons, but roasting a chicken is one of the easiest meals to make, and it's so delicious, and it's actually pretty inexpensive. You can buy a nice roasting chicken for not a lot of money, but I splurged on the rotisserie chicken for this. So these are corn tortillas, and I was saying to my colleagues before, I had a remarkably hard time finding corn tortillas in the store for this, which was strange to me. I think because of COVID, there's still some supply chain irregularities, but the store I went to only had one package of corn tortillas with 6 tortillas. So I am doing the rest of these as flour tortillas, which is totally acceptable. We're going to treat them the same and just press them in here. So one of the things that's great about leftovers, and the way I always think of leftovers, is that if you're eating leftovers, it's one night you're not cooking. So I love cooking like so very much, but I kind of want to break occasionally. So I always cook to purposefully have leftovers. I know that they can be a very polarizing thing for some families. Some people just don't care for eating them, but I think of them as a break from cooking for a night. And so I always make a little extra. And if you don't want to eat them the way you originally made them, there's so many creative things you can do to make a new meal out of leftovers, which I'll talk about in a moment. So what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to take a little more cooking spray and spritz these. You don't have to do this. I think it makes them taste a little extra yummy. And they're going to get nice and brown. And I'm going to put these in a 425-degree oven. You would normally do this for probably 5 to 7 minutes. I'm going to check it a lot sooner because, as we've mentioned here before, our ovens here are pretty powerful. So I'm going to check it in about 3 minutes. So the point of doing that is to get them nice and crispy, and then they'll really hold the filling, which we're going to get to now. So what I did was I took about half of the rotisserie chicken that I got, and you can shred, I'm just going to quick cut up the meat. So there's some light meat and dark meat here. So as I was saying, when you're using leftovers, taking what you have and creating a whole new meal from them can make them a little more exciting if that's what you don't like about them. So things like, first and foremost, making something like this. So we're taking chicken, mixing it with some new ingredients and making a whole new meal out of it. If you didn't want to make tostada cups, you could just actually add diced cooked chicken into a pan, heat it up, and add taco seasoning, like you were doing with ground beef or something like that. And you could make chicken or turkey tacos, which is delicious. Another really easy thing to do with leftovers is make soup. You can literally throw anything into a pot of good broth and season it properly and have a really delicious soup. Add maybe some rice or noodles. So that's a great way to use up leftovers. Another thing that you can do, especially if you have vegetable scraps from cooking, so if you're making a big meal for a holiday and you have lots of vegetable peelings and scraps and parts of the vegetables that didn't go into your dish, something really great to do with that is to stick them in a bag, a zip top bag, freeze them, and then you can use them to make your own vegetable or some other kind of stock down the road. You just pull them out, put them in water, simmer them with some seasoning, and you could have a really delicious vegetable stock and nothing's going to waste. So I'm just going to check these because they're going to cook faster than I anticipated. Yep. So I feel like this is almost time-lapse here. You could see how toasty those already got. That would not happen as quickly in your home oven. But again, these are pretty powerful ovens here. So what I'm going to do is I am going to mix this diced up chicken with some salsa. This is just bottled salsa. I'm going to maybe pour about a cup in and mix it up. And this is going to be part of our chicken filling. So to make these tostadas, what I am going to do is fill each one of these cups with a little bit of refried beans, and then put some chicken in them and then some cheese on top. And this again, like I'm using refried beans because I really like them, but you could use plain black or pinto beans or even kidney beans, just like a can drained and rinsed. You could omit this. You could throw some rice in here if you have leftover rice, which we're going to do with the stir fry, but you could actually put some rice in the bottom of this. You could, something that I think would be delicious is if you made these as a Thanksgiving tostada. So if you have leftover stuffing and turkey and cranberry sauce, put some stuffing and turkey in, heat it up, and then top with some cranberry sauce. I think that would be delicious. You could even throw green bean casserole in there. It would probably be really good. So just my point being, there are so many different ways to think about being creative with your leftovers, and I hope you'll take that into consideration. Another great thing to do is to consider leftovers lunch for the next day. I mean, I know many people are working from home these days, so if you're getting tired of grilled cheese or peanut butter and jelly, have your dinner leftovers maybe in a slightly smaller portion for lunch the next day. And I'm going to pause for a moment and just reintroduce myself. I'm Valerie, and you're watching Learning Kitchen Live, episode number 19, and we are talking about repurposing leftovers. And right now I am making chicken tostada cups. So another thing to do with leftovers is to, if you cook extra, portion them out and freeze them in like usable portions. You know, if you're cooking for only 1 or 2 people in your home, portioning things out and sticking them in the freezer make for a really easy meal some other time. I do that a lot too, actually. We are leftover eaters. We're leftover connoisseurs in our house. We'll eat food until it's gone, and I tend to not mind that, but as I said earlier, I know that's a very polarizing topic for some people. All right, so I'm going to actually leave a couple of these with just the beans in them because a few of my colleagues who might want to partake in tasting this afterwards are vegetarians, so we are going to leave a few options available for them. So I'll just fill up the rest here. When I post this recipe online or in the chat later today, there will be actual measurements, but this is something you can totally just eyeball if you need to. You don't have to be super fancy or exact with this. So the final step is I'm going to just sprinkle a little bit. This is just a cheddar jack blend, low fat. Sprinkle this. And then these are going to go back in the oven for a couple of minutes until the cheese is melted and the chicken's heated up, and they're delicious. All right. So back in the oven, these are going to go for just a few minutes. And we're going to move on to our next recipe. So recipe number 2 is I'm calling leftover fried rice. And leftover rice is something I always seem to have in my refrigerator. I cook rice a lot I make a lot of stir fries at home with leftovers, leftover veggies. And so I always seem to have more rice than I know what to do with. Maybe that's my problem, and I'm just not good at estimating how much we're going to eat after many years. But there's also the phenomenon, if you get Chinese takeout or a takeout where rice comes with it, there's always like a leftover carton for some reason. I feel like we always end up with more rice than we ever need. And fried rice is the perfect way to reuse leftover rice because you actually want it to be cold. You don't want to make fried rice with just cooked hot rice. It's going to get really like mushy and it's not going to be as tasty. So you want it to be leftover. So what I have here is a bunch of cooked brown rice. I actually cooked this last night so it could sit and chill overnight and it would be ready for today. But this is another recipe where honestly anything goes. You could throw anything into this and it's going to taste delicious. What I'm hoping to show you is more just the basic technique of what you could do. And so this is going to be a vegetarian fried rice. We're going to do it with scrambled egg, and but you could add anything into this. You could put chicken or turkey into it, leftover pork or beef. You could put tofu in it. You could make it completely vegan and not put any egg into it at all. You can throw nuts and seeds into it. It's going to be really delicious. Just before I get engaged in this, I'm going to turn my stove on and then I'm going to check those tostadas again. Alright, so I'm going to let my pan heat up for a second and I'm going to go over here and just check these. Oh yeah, those are done. So again, these cooked very, very fast here, but look at how delicious and brown. And this is just what you want. You want things not burned, but browned and bubbly. So we're going to let these cool before we plate them up. All right. So the first thing we're going to do with the fried rice is I have 2 eggs here. I'm just going to beat these slightly with a fork, and I'm going to scramble them. And if you've never made a scrambled egg, we're just going to oil the pan, throw the eggs in, stir them around till they're cooked, and then we're going to take them out. Super simple. And again, if you don't want to use eggs, you can skip this step. So I have some butter here. I'm going to take like about a half a tablespoon of butter. And you don't have to use butter. I actually think it just gives a little nice extra flavor in this dish. It gives it a little richness, but you could omit the butter. You can just use oil. The recipe I post has butter, and you know, if you wanted to completely omit dairy or saturated fat, just don't use it. Or use a vegetable-based butter. I'm gonna let that heat up. So the idea here is to cook the eggs, get the vegetables cooking and nice and soft, and then we're going to add the rice and some seasoning and the eggs back in, and you have fried rice, and it's super simple. I've actually done this with silken tofu. You can treat the tofu like egg and kind of cook it up in the pan a little bit and then add it back in at the end. All right. So this is going to cook pretty quickly. You just want it to get nice and cooked up. If anybody is listening who has favorite things that they do with leftovers, please feel free to chat them in. I would love to read them off, and I'm happy to answer any questions as well. This is also probably a good time to talk a little bit about food safety. When cooking food anytime, you want to make sure that you are adhering to some basic food safety rules. You want to cook foods to a temperature that's safe, especially meat and poultry. and you want to let it cool down quickly, and you want to store it at a safe temperature. And then if you are reheating it, you want it to be to a safe temperature. So in food, in cooking, there's something called the temperature danger zone, which is 40 degrees to 140 degrees Fahrenheit. And that's called the danger zone because that range is the zone in which bacteria love to live and flourish. So you want to keep food out of that zone as long as possible. So I'm going to, so you can see the egg is just nice and scrambled and cooked. Goes really quickly. I'm going to move that to a plate. And I'm going to add the rest of my butter and my vegetables and let those cook up and get nice and soft. I'm going to get back to that temperature danger zone in a moment. I happen to be using raw vegetables here, but this is great if you have leftover cooked vegetables. Just toss them in. I often do this at home with literally anything that's in my refrigerator just to use it up so it doesn't go bad, because I'm a little bit crazy like that about not letting food go to waste. I just really, like, it pains me to throw food away. And it's not that it doesn't happen occasionally, but and I'm also not a picky eater, so maybe that helps. All right. I am going to add, these were 2 chopped carrots, and they were actually giant carrots, but we have it all chopped. So I'm going to put it in. And I would like to thank, we have an amazing intern right now. His name is Steve, and he helped me chop all these vegetables. So I would like to give him a shout out and thank him for helping me with this. All right, so carrots and an onion. That's what I'm going to start with here. And we're just going to let these get a little bit softened. All right, so back to food safety. 40 to 140 degrees. That is the temperature danger zone, and you want to keep your food out of that temperature range for as much as possible. So that means when you cook things like meat, there's recommended cooking temperatures for meats, which most of you probably know. It's 165 degrees for poultry and ground meat, 145 degrees for most red meats, so pork and beef. And people can argue about cooking beef, very rare, and I know people like to do that, but it really, and if it's been handled well through its whole supply chain, it's probably okay, but I like to get my meat up to at least 145 degrees. And then, so what that means is after you cook something, you want it to cool down to below that 40 degree mark as quickly as possible, so it's not lingering in that danger zone. This becomes specifically important over the holidays if you're serving a buffet, for example, and you don't have food in warming trays and it's sitting out for hours. If you've handled your food carefully along the way, it's not likely you're going to get anybody sick, but it really is important to keep food heated and to cool it down, and then to reheat it if it's gotten cold. Some tips for cooling food down quickly is to have it in a shallow pan, or put it in a shallow pan and put it in the refrigerator really quickly so it cools out, more surface area, and it'll get cool quicker. If you have a big pot of soup that you want to cool quickly, something I do is fill up my kitchen sink with some cold water and ice, plug the drain, and then put the pot in that and stir it a little bit. It helps it cool down really quickly. And then just get it into the refrigerator as quickly as you can. All right, these are cooking up nicely. We'll give it a few more minutes here. And then something key with leftovers in particular is getting them reheated to 165 degrees, no matter what it is, because that food has been cooked, it's sat, and then cooled down. If you're going to eat it, even if it's been frozen, you want to reheat it to 165 degrees, an internal temperature. Having a thermometer, an instant read thermometer, they're pretty inexpensive, is really a really helpful gadget to have in your kitchen, because it'll tell you just stick it in, and it'll tell you pretty quickly what the temperature of your food is. And again, with leftovers, super important to get it up to 165 degrees. Now, the USDA website has a whole, actually, if you Google USDA leftovers, they have a whole website dedicated to the safe handling of food and leftovers, which I think is great. And they say it is safe to take something that has been frozen, heat it to eat it, and then to refreeze it and then heat it again. I've never been a huge proponent of that, but I guess as long as you get it to 165 degrees both times you're reheating it, you can. I tend to think if you've frozen something and reheated it, and then if you freeze it again, the quality is going to start getting not great, but they say it's safe to do. It is not has not been my general practice. But again, the goal is to just keep your food safe, get it steaming hot, and cool it as quickly as you can, and you should be okay. All right, so these carrots and onions are getting nice and soft. What I'm gonna add next is I have some sliced green onions. So I'm gonna put those in. And then I have 3 cloves of garlic that I minced, and I'm gonna put that in. And again, these flavors are really a traditional Asian style fried rice, but you know, anything goes. You don't have to put green onions in. You could put celery in, actually. I always seem to have an abundance of celery in my house. So celery would be great in this. You could throw spinach, greens, anything in it. All right, we're gonna let those heat up for a minute. And then the next step is gonna be the rice. Oh, I have peas too, frozen peas. Again, totally optional. If you really wanna shortcut this, buy a bag of frozen mixed vegetables and just call it a day. Put those in, heat it up, do some of these other steps, and you have a delicious stir fry really quickly and really inexpensively too. Ooh, that was a lot of peas. The recipe calls for about a half a cup of frozen green peas. I might have gone a little overboard there. And you don't actually even need to defrost these before throwing them in. They'll just defrost in the pan, except for this giant chunk of peas that I'm actually going to take out. All right, next step is I'm going to add a tiny bit of canola oil, and I'm going to put the rice in and just get that nice and cooked, like nice and warmed up. The oil is going to help the grains really separate, and it'll be really good. That was maybe a teaspoon that I put in there, so not very much. I'm not going to use all this rice. It's a little more than I need. The recipe calls for about 4 cups. This is way more than that. You can also do this with other grains. So if you make quinoa, for example, if you're avoiding, you can use rice, but if you're avoiding gluten, you could make it with quinoa. You could use leftover farro, barley, anything. I'm going to break that up a little. Something that you'll notice if you actually looked at these recipes that I'm going to post later is that there's no added salt in either of these, and there's a reason for that. They, here at Community Servings, we feel pretty strongly as dietitians here that most Americans have too much salt in their diet, and cooking from scratch is one very easy way to limit and manage the amount of salt in your daily diet. But a lot of the things that we're adding to these dishes already have a ton of salt in them. So with the chicken tostada cups, the salsa, and the refried beans actually both made for a lot of sodium. You can sometimes find low salt salsa and refried beans, but they are not readily available. I was not able to find them in Whole Foods or Star Market. So I did not add, and the cheese too has a lot of salt. So I did not add any salt to this recipe, and it's still going to be really flavorful. This is going to be seasoned by some soy sauce, which is really delicious. You could also add things like hoisin sauce, oyster sauce, hot sauce, but all of those condiments have a fair amount of sodium in them. So that's why I did not add any additional salt, but certainly season as you would like. All right. So I'm going to wrap this up in the interest of time, but something that's really delicious to do with a dish like this is let the rice sit for maybe like 4 or 5 minutes, and it's going to get a really nice crunchy crust on the bottom, which is delicious. So all I'm going to do here is I have about 3 tablespoons of soy sauce. I'm going to add that in. Mix that up. And I am going to season this with a tiny bit of black pepper. Again, totally optional. And then I'm going to put the scrambled egg back in. And this is a really delicious dinner, meal, lunch, whatever, breakfast. Honestly, this would be like a breakfast of my dreams. That has a lot of protein, not a lot of sodium, totally healthy for you. One of the other things that you can add to this if you want, and I'm going to, is a dash of sesame oil. I didn't cook with it, but if you want to add like a tiny bit at the end just for flavor, or toasted sesame seeds, it adds just a nice little flavor. And there you have it. We have this beautiful, look at how pretty and colorful that is. This beautiful veggie fried rice. And these beautiful chicken tostada cups. Let me grab one of those out of there so you can see how nicely they held up. A little wobbly, but okay. And these you could top with anything that you would normally do for a taco. So like sour cream, more shredded cheese, lettuce, olives, jalapenos, anything you like. So that is it for today. Have there been any questions? I'm going to ask my helpers in the background. No questions. Hopefully I've answered all of them along the way. But I hope everybody enjoyed this. You can start thinking about leftovers in a slightly different way. And I hope you all have a wonderful and safe holiday. We'll see you back here next week.